Hi everyone, Allie at my safe place here. I've done something wonky with my camera settings again. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. Who knows what this is going to really look like. I think I look really shiny and I have no idea how to fix it. Anyway, the thought that has been sitting in my head and ruminating and digesting and actually coming to fruition has been all around the empath and empathy piece that a lot of people, including experts out there, say that there's this huge connection between narcissists, cluster Bs, and empaths, or people who feel other people's feelings or who are highly sensitive, or whatever word seems to describe that phenomenon best to you. I sort of consider it um, empathy, empathizing. And I know that there's a very strong correlation between having grown up in a home with a cluster B or narcissistic parent and some of the children of a parent like that developing a skill for being able to read or sense their parents' feelings or needs as a survival mechanism. And I know that was certainly true for me. Um, and what ends up happening in many cases is that this sensitive or empathic child learns to sublimate or repress or suppress their own feelings in favor of the narcissistic parent and then everyone else around them by default, as a way to survive. And that as you grow up with this survival mechanism in place, it makes it very difficult for us to have empathy for ourselves, in part because we have no understanding of our own feelings, no sense of our own feelings that we've completely repressed in order to survive. And there are experts out there who explain this way better than I have. And as I've been going through the healing process, the complex PTSD process, and separating myself from the cluster Bs and narcissists in my life, going no contact, etc. What I found by doing the research and reading, and a lot of people will say, if you're empathizing too much with the wrong types of feelings, they will tell you or tell us that we're not shielding enough, we're not grounding and shielding enough. And I always found this advice incredibly problematic because I couldn't tell the difference between what was my feelings and what was someone else's feelings. I had no notion of my own feelings or a separation between my feelings and someone with whom I was empathizing, because that's the way I had been raised. And so entering into relationships with other narcissists, whether it was a romantic relationship or even a friendship, was incredibly natural and familiar. And so the idea that I would have to shield, that somehow I wasn't shielding enough, and that I was allowing all this feeling from other people to come in by choice somehow, really never made sense at all. And the best analogy that I could come up with as a former dancer, specifically ballet, it started to occur to me as I was thinking about it. Now, as a dancer, I can tell when I'm watching another dancer, especially as a teacher of dance and ballet, you can see musicality in dancers. You can actually see how musical they are. And people would often say actually that of me, that I was an incredibly musical dancer. And it's a very difficult thing to describe to people who don't necessarily understand that. And I know that you can hear musicality with musicians specifically. And it's interesting because I can actually see musicality in musicians. I can see it in their body. So I'm attuned to watching for that incredible musicality, and I can see musicality in dancers, and I can see musicality and sometimes hear musicality in musicians. And I know as a musical dancer that if someone were to tell me that I was being musical wrong, or that I needed to tone down my musicality, I would have absolutely no idea how to do that. And I don't think a musician would either. Musicality is like an innate part of the talent, and it's not something that you can turn on or turn off or increase or decrease just by setting an intention to do so. It's one of those immeasurable pieces of someone's talent. And you can be incredibly talented and gifted as a dancer or a musician without being super musical. It's just one of those additional pieces that just can give that extra je ne sais quoi to someone's performance. And I think the same can be applied to empathy and an empath. I think telling an empath not to feel or not to get a sense of someone else's feelings, especially from someone like a cluster B personality disorder and or narcissist who is projecting. There's the key. These are people who project all the time. And we as empaths are people who absorb it all the time. So telling a cluster B not to project, or telling an empath not to empathize, is tantamount to telling a musical dancer or a musical musician not to be musical. Not possible. I don't think it's doable. So I think this advice that we need to ground and shield from someone else's feelings that are being projected upon us by a master projector, not just a little bit of projection that we all kind of do from time to time. We all project. We're human beings. It happens. And we can become aware of when we're projecting and when we're not. And that's a skill that we can develop. But with a cluster B personality disorder, they are master projectors, and they are never going to admit that they're projecting. That's part and parcel of their problem. So our problem becomes less, I think, about shielding and more about differentiating. And this is what I've started to come to terms with in my own healing. And remember, these are just my personal opinions. I'm not speaking as any kind of professional here. There are experts, I'm sure, who would completely disagree with me and, have at it. But what I'm finding for me, for my personal healing and my personal opinion, is that I could no more turn off empathizing than I could stop being and having a highly sensitive nervous system, which I acquired genetically from my father. There are some things that we just have. So what I've been learning through this healing process, and as I separate more and more from the cluster Bs in my life by going no contact, I am starting to become more and more aware, and it's very subtle, especially at first, of being able to acknowledge and identify what my feelings are. And this is a skill that I never learned as a child, and that all children in healthy homes with healthy, loving, supportive parents or guardians should learn, is what they're feeling and having their feelings validated. So as someone who never had that, I'm having to do that for myself as an adult. And as I begin this process of validating myself and acknowledging what my true feelings are, it's actually becoming more and more possible. I'm not going to say easy, because there's nothing easy about this. More and more possible for me to differentiate my feelings from someone else's. Now, how this affects empathy is that I can actually choose more and more with greater and greater awareness what I'm going to empathize with and what I'm absolutely going to decide isn't mine. I'm becoming more and more able to differentiate between empathizing with someone who's simply feeling something versus empathizing with someone who is very clearly projecting. And there's a difference between those two. So the key that I'm finding to managing the way I was raised and the way I deal with my feelings versus someone else's is actually differentiating rather than blocking or shielding. And the more aware I become of my own feelings, the more clear it becomes when someone is projecting onto me, it's becoming more and more uncomfortable. So way back when I was a child and an adult empathizing with someone who was projecting, there was no discomfort because it was completely and utterly natural, and it's what I had grown up with. So I'm seeing this change and this growth and becoming more aware of my own feelings and being able to differentiate between when someone is feeling something, genuinely feeling something, and I'm empathizing with someone who's, let's say, grieving, or someone who's having a hard day, or even empathizing with someone who's having a wonderful moment. I can truly empathize, and there is absolutely no need to ground, block, shield, because it's not being projected upon. It's me. It's being genuinely felt by that person. So I can now empathize with that person, meeting them where they are, versus someone who's projecting all over me. Now I'm starting to come to the awareness, and this is cognitively at first. So cognitively, I'm sensing when someone, I'm knowing, I'm feeling, whatever you want to call it. Cognitively, I'm aware that someone is projecting with greater and greater accuracy. And part of what's helping me determine that someone is projecting is actually a change in how I feel. So I'm starting to feel more and more uncomfortable with other people projecting. And I think that this has been a major breakthrough for me. And this happened when I talked about being blindsided in some previous videos and what happened with that blindsiding. Cognitively, I was aware that I was being projected upon, and the feelings that it brought upon me were incredibly uncomfortable. And I was able to differentiate between this person's projection upon me and what was actually true for me. Now, did this happen instantaneously? Christ, no. Sorry for swearing. I do feel like this took some work, but I'm really thrilled that it actually happened, because now I'm beginning to understand that my body, my feelings, my cognitive awareness are shifting. And the projections that used to be so natural and comfortable for me to take on, even if it was an uncomfortable feeling coming from someone else, that I just automatically took on, absorbed, is no longer happening. That is actually now changing, and I'm beginning to differentiate. And the key point of this is my own cognitive awareness of my feelings. So I'm not just randomly feeling things and then spewing them. I'm feeling things and being cognitively aware of what those feelings are. This is incredibly clunky and awkward and time consuming, but I'm willing to do it. I think it's going to be worth it. I really believe in this whole idea that I don't have to change who I am as an empath. I can use that incredible strength and gift that I was given with the discomfort of the upbringing that I had. I can pull the positive out of this. I can become the kind of empath that is able to differentiate between empathizing with someone who is genuinely feeling their emotions versus someone who is projecting in an effort to offload onto me, in an effort to make me feel bad so that they don't have to, kind of thing, which is what goes on with narcissists and other cluster B personality disordered people. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm really going to be exploring this, I think, a little bit more, especially as it relates to being, as well as being an empath, having this incredibly sensitive nervous system that I know has a strong genetic component, as opposed to the empathy, which I believe is a combination of genetics and the kind of upbringing I had. So anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.